In politics, some careers are a slow burn. They build over decades. And then others just explode onto the scene like a firework. Well, today, we're looking at Sudan Gurung, a political firework who lit up the sky in Nepal, only to burn out in, well, spectacular fashion. 26 days. That's it. That is how long Sudan Gurung, the celebrated anti-corruption champion, actually lasted as Nepal's home minister. I mean, a tenure so short you could have blinked and missed it, yet it sent absolute shockwaves through the country's entire political landscape. So, that's the big question, right? How does a figurehead of reform, a guy literally swept into power on this huge wave of public hope, fall from grace in less than a month? Let's get into it and unpack the story of his meteoric rise and his even faster fall. Okay, so to really get the impact of his resignation, you first have to understand just how different Sudan Gurung was. This guy was not your typical politician. His journey to one of the most powerful jobs in Nepal was, to put it lightly, pretty unconventional. I mean, just look at this path he took. He starts out as a DJ and an event manager, but then the 2015 earthquake hits, and that seems to be a real turning point for him. He gets deep into humanitarian work. That leads him to found his own emergency response group, Hemi Nepal, which got a ton of attention during the pandemic. By 2025, he's one of the main faces of these huge Gen Z protests against corruption. And that momentum, that public energy, it carries him straight into parliament and then boom, home minister in 2026. What a ride. Yeah, that Gen Z movement was basically his launch pad. You have to understand, this wasn't just a handful of protests. It was a nationwide scream of frustration from young people who were fed up with what they saw as a corrupt and out-of-touch political class. Gurung managed to become the voice for their demands, turning his grassroots relief network into a real political force. So he gets into office, and he does not waste a single second. Right away, he starts trying to deliver on his promises, basically signaling to everyone that a new era of accountability was here. This was it. This was his declaration of war on corruption. He posted this on social media right after his first day. It wasn't just talk. He wanted the whole country to see he was serious. You can imagine this message electrified his supporters, and it sent a very, very clear message to the old guard. And boy, did he back up those words with action. Just look at this list. We are talking about a former prime minister, former ministers, some of the most powerful business leaders in the entire country. He launched this blitz of high-profile arrests that just rocked the foundations of Nepal's political elite. For so many people, it really felt like the change they'd been hoping for was finally actually happening. But here's the thing. When you shake up the establishment that hard, the establishment tends to shake back. And in this just stunning twist, the hunter suddenly became the hunted. The guy leading the charge against corruption was now facing accusations of his own. So, what happened? How did the entire narrative just flip on a dime like that? Let's break down the actual controversy that completely unraveled his short time as minister. Okay, so here's the heart of it. It turns out Gurung held shares in companies that were linked to Deepak Butt, one of the very businessmen he had ordered to be arrested. So the allegations started flying, that he didn't properly disclose these shares, that nobody knew where he got the money to buy them, and of course, the huge potential conflict of interest. Now, Gurung's defense was basically that it was all a big misunderstanding. He said, hey, I bought those shares before I was a minister, I used money from a loan, and he argued the investigation wasn't even under his ministry anyway. He pretty much dismissed the whole thing as a smear campaign, sponsored rumors by the people he was investigating. But, and this is the crucial part that really undermined his whole story, while he claimed the money for the shares came from a loan, the loan section on his official asset declaration, the one he had to submit to the Prime Minister's office, was left completely blank. And that one little detail, that discrepancy, it raised some really serious questions and just poured fuel on the fire of public doubt. So, with his explanation full of holes and his credibility taking a major hit, the political pressure just started building from every single direction. It pretty quickly became clear that his position as home minister was just not sustainable. And it wasn't just the opposition parties calling for him to step down. The pressure was coming from civil society groups, the very people who'd been cheering for reform. And what was probably most damaging, voices from inside his own party started speaking up. That chorus just got too loud to ignore. So on April 22nd, after just 26 days in office, it was over. He resigned. In his statement, he tried to frame it as, A moral choice, stepping down to uphold the same ethical standards he'd been fighting for and to allow for a fair investigation. So, what do we make of all this? I mean, it's a whirlwind of a political story. His time in office was incredibly short, but his impact, and maybe more importantly, the questions he leaves behind, are pretty significant. The irony here is just impossible to miss. A leader who comes to power demanding transparency is brought down by allegations of undisclosed assets. A champion for accountability finds himself staring down a potential conflict of interest. It's a truly tragic contradiction. And that really leaves us with the biggest question of all. This whole story is about more than just one guy. It's a real test for Nepal's entire youth-led reform movement. When your champion for clean government gets tarnished by scandal himself, what happens to the fight? Where does all that hope and energy go?